In 1845, 129 British officers and sailors sailed into the Arctic to complete the Northwest Passage. None returned alive. At the time, the expedition looked almost unbeatable. It had two reinforced ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, years of supplies, steam engines, experienced officers, and the confidence of an empire that believed planning and technology could master the Arctic. Then it vanished. The commander was Sir John Franklin, already famous, already respected, and nearly 60 years old. Britain sent him north believing discipline, preparation, and national prestige could force a way through one of the harshest environments on Earth. The last confirmed European sighting came in the summer of 1845, when whalers saw the ships in Baffin Bay. After that, nothing. No letters returned. No ship came home. No official message escaped the ice. As the silence stretched on, unease turned into dread. Search ships were sent north. Sledge parties crossed frozen ground. Searchers looked for camps, wreckage, graves, any trace at all. Lady Jane Franklin played a huge role in keeping that effort alive. She refused to let the disappearance fade into official resignation. The first major shock came on Beechey Island. There, searchers found the graves of 3 crewmen from the expedition's first winter: John Torrington, William Brain, and John Hartnell. The expedition had reached the Arctic. It had survived the first winter, and men were already dead. Then came the most chilling document in the entire story: the Victory Point Note. Left in 1847 and updated in 1848, it revealed that Franklin had died in June 1847. It also revealed that by April 1848, the surviving crew had abandoned both ships after they became trapped in the ice. More than 100 men were now trying to escape on foot. That note is chilling because of how calm it sounds. It records catastrophe in the controlled language of naval procedure. No panic, no emotion, just facts. Franklin dead. Ships abandoned. Men heading south. Behind those spare lines sits the real horror of the expedition's final phase. These were starving, exhausted men trying to drag themselves and their supplies across ice and barren ground in a landscape that offered almost nothing in return. As later searchers and archaeologists gathered more evidence, the picture grew darker. There were abandoned belongings, human remains, and signs that the retreat had turned into a drawn-out collapse. These were not men making a difficult but orderly journey to safety. They were men being slowly destroyed by hunger, exposure, exhaustion, and distance. Some of the most important evidence came from Inuit testimony. Inuit witnesses described starving white men, ships trapped in the ice, and desperate conditions in the expedition's final stage. For years, many British officials were slow to give those accounts the weight they deserved. In the end, Inuit knowledge proved essential to understanding what happened. Then came the detail that made the story impossible to keep tidy. Examinations of recovered human remains found cut marks on bones. Many researchers take this as strong evidence that, in the final stage of the disaster, some of the men resorted to cannibalism. That matters not because it is lurid, but because it shows how completely the expedition had collapsed. These were Royal Navy crews sent out under the language of order, empire, and discipline. In the end, some of them may have been reduced to the most desperate act of survival imaginable. Why did it happen? There is no single clean answer. Ice trapped the ships for too long. Scurvy and illness likely weakened the men. Starvation and exposure did the rest. Lead poisoning has often been proposed as a contributing factor, but it does not explain everything. What seems most likely is a chain of failures: malnutrition, illness, cold, exhaustion, poor luck, and a landscape that punished every bad turn. There is also the harder question of leadership after Franklin's death. Once the commander was gone, discipline remained, but the expedition had lost its center. Plans that looked reasonable on a chart could become fatal in practice. A retreat that sounded possible on paper could become impossible once men were starving and weak. The truth was probably worse than one dramatic mistake. It likely went wrong slowly. That is one reason the Franklin expedition still grips people so strongly. It was not a sudden vanishing followed by a neat explanation. It was a slow failure. A powerful state sent 2 ships north with confidence, equipment, and prestige. Then the Arctic trapped them, starved them, broke them apart, and returned their story in fragments. For decades, Franklin's story was wrapped in imperial myth, noble sacrifice, endurance, courage. But the evidence left behind is harder than the myth. Men died in the ice. Some survived long enough to abandon the ships. Some struggled south on foot. Some were seen starving. Some left bones marked by desperate survival. And still, even now, the Arctic has not given up everything. In 2014, HMS Erebus was found. In 2016, HMS Terror was found. Those discoveries answered major questions and proved that the expedition had not dissolved into legend. The ships were still there, preserved in the cold, waiting more than a century to be found. But the wrecks did not restore the missing human experience. They did not tell us every wrong choice, every moment of hope, or every final calculation. That is why the Franklin expedition still feels bigger than a lost voyage. It is a story about confidence collapsing into helplessness, about imperial ambition meeting a place that did not care, about how an expedition can begin in ceremony and end in starvation, cut bones, and silence. In the end, the Franklin expedition was not swallowed whole. It was left behind in pieces: graves on Beachy Island, a brief note at Victory Point, scattered relics, Inuit testimony, bones carrying marks of the last resort, and 2 ships found long after everyone aboard them was gone. The Arctic did not keep the whole story. It kept enough.